All right, and with that, I think we will get started. So thank you again, all of you for joining us today. My name is Catherine Sacco. I'm the Director of Partnerships at the Urban Design Forum, and I lead our Forefront Fellowship, and really excited to share a little bit more about the fellowship with you today. We have a couple of special guests with us, a few alumni of the program who will be sharing a little bit about their experience later on in the hour. We're gonna get started with a little bit of context about the program. Then we'll welcome our alumni on to talk a little bit about their experience. And then we'll open it up for questions from all of you. So feel free to submit questions in the chat as we go, and we'll have plenty of time to get to your questions at the end of the hour. I just also want to shout out my colleague Lola Vieira Sullivan is here supporting on tech today. So thanks, Lola. And if you're having any tech issues, she is the right person to message. All right, so here we go. For those of you who may be new to the Urban Design Forum, we're a membership organization that gathers civic leaders to confront the defining issues facing our city. We have around 750 members who are designers, planners, developers, civic leaders, working in really every corner of the 5 boroughs to build a more just and beautiful city for our neighbors. So we created the Forefront Fellowship because we wanted to support courageous new leaders as they take on urgent challenges facing facing our city. And that's all of you who are here today. So Forefront is our annual leadership development program. It gathers 25 emerging leaders to look at a pressing challenge in our built environment. And we take on a different annual theme every year. So it's a 10-month program, and over the course of those 10 months, it really offers fellows the chance to first and foremost build community. This is like really, really at the heart of the Forefront experience. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about this from our alumni later this afternoon, but it's a fantastic cohort, and really building community amongst the cohort and beyond is a big priority of the fellowship. It also offers fellows a chance to shape our city by taking on a social or political challenge through design. So as I mentioned, we take on a different challenge every year. In past years, recently, we've looked at heat resiliency. We've looked at green economies. This past year, we just wrapped up a fellowship focused on our food system, just to name a few. And finally, the third thing that the fellowship really offers is the chance to change the discipline of design by cultivating an approach that is grounded in equity and also strengthened by interdisciplinary connection. So I should have said that cohort of 25, we always do our best to really build an interdisciplinary group, bring together folks who are looking at the year's issue area from a variety of perspectives. And we find that sort of interdisciplinary cross-pollination is really a big part of what makes this fellowship experience special. So through these 3 things, through building community, shaping our city, and changing the discipline of design, we really see the fellows build their capacity as civic leaders in New York. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this year's program, New Loops. The big intractable challenge we're going to be taking on this year is the city's waste system. And so I'd actually love to hear from all of you. Before I talk about what we're going to be working on, would love to hear from you all in the chat. What questions are you fired up about with the waste system? What are you puzzling over? What are you eager to dig into with this year's topic of the New York City waste system? So I'll pause for a second and would love to see what's on your mind in the chat. Yeah, how on earth will we get to zero waste by 2030 as planned? Great question. Implementing commercial waste zones. Yes, definitely. What else have we got? Containerized waste on everyone's mind, definitely. Containerization. All right, well, feel free to keep throwing some ideas in there. Yes, restarting the composting program, community and municipal scale systems, how to make our waste a resource for our city, integrating building design and alternate waste streams, textile waste, awesome, awesome. Having zoning that allows rooftop composting, designated waste collection areas. Yeah, this is great. Keep them coming. these are all things that we are hoping that we'll be able to touch on in the next year's fellowship. So I'm really excited about this year's fellowship because waste is such a tangible human experience. You know, we can all talk about like how we throw out our trash or whether we compost, or, you know, in my case, my block association's recent crusade against rats on the block. But our waste is also really part of this complex system with really important consequences for our environment and for our city life. And so, you know, as many of you know, as someone dropped in the chat, New York City has a goal of getting to zero waste by 2030. And as we also know, this is going to require really rethinking our waste system. So, you know, our streets are not designed to handle waste, right? We see piles of waste competing for space with outdoor dining, with street trees, with pedestrians. And our current system also really creates negative environmental impacts that we don't want to see in neighborhoods that host waste infrastructure and in communities outside of New York where we currently export our waste. So we are going to spend the year investigating new approaches to waste that support our health, our climate, and our society. So we'll start in the first phase of the fellowship by deeply researching the challenges of our current system. And every year in the first phase, we partner with a city agency to take on a project that they have defined as an area where they could really use creative thinking, a group of interested and passionate minds to help advance their agency thinking. And so we'll be partnering this year with the Department of Sanitation. And in this first phase, we provide a really highly structured research project that the cohort works on together, all 25 of you. In the second phase of the fellowship, we really hand the reins over to you all, to the cohort. And you'll build on what you learned in phase one to explore solutions and new visions for our waste system. So in that second phase, you'll actually have a chance to break into small teams to develop independent projects. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into each of these phases, starting with phase one. So in our partnership with DSNY this year, we're going to start off the year looking at specifically how large residential buildings handle their waste. Because, you know, all over the city, and especially in our largest apartment buildings, trash is piling up on the sidewalks and not enough of it is being diverted from landfills. So we're going to ask, how can we design for cleaner buildings, sidewalks, and streets? But we won't just be looking at building design, we'll also be looking at building management and socioeconomic factors. And we'll be looking to develop a framework for understanding how these various factors, building design, management, socioeconomics, impact waste outcomes. We're going to do that by getting out into the city. So we'll go on building site visits, we'll do neighborhood study tours, we'll talk to everyone we possibly can, from building managers to waste management experts, to architects and engineers, community advocates. And through that research, at the end of the process, we will work together as a cohort to develop a simple typology framework that can help DSNY understand how these building factors influence waste outcomes. And the goal is for this framework to both help the Department of Sanitation advance their own understanding on this question, and to inform future policy changes that might be coming, like changes to the building code or containerization strategies or pay-as-you-throw models. So along with that typology framework, we'll also develop a series of public-facing illustrations to help tell this story of our current waste management system and envision new solutions. I wanted to just briefly show the calendar for phase one. During this phase, we meet roughly every other week for full day workshops. It's a 2-day orientation and then a mix of workshops and fieldwork throughout the fall. Although that we do anticipate meeting in person this year, we'll be following the latest safety protocols, and so we'll communicate more details on that with the cohort closer to the September start date. We'll take a break for the holidays at the end of the year, and then we will jump into phase two. And this is again where we really turn the reins of the project work over to you all to define what you want to work on. So we sometimes talk about phase one and phase two as moving from working within the system to working outside of the system. In phase two, you will choose small teams within the cohort to work in specific focus areas of your own definition. So you'll choose your teams and you'll choose your project topics. And building on what you've already learned in the first phase, your small teams will explore creative solutions and system approaches to rethinking waste. We encourage, though, don't necessarily require you to work with community-based organizations or other organizations already working on this issue area. Yeah, I see a shout out to BK Rott, which a previous team worked with on their phase 2 project. Your team will design your project outcome. It can really take whatever team whatever shape your team determines and is interested in, and I'll point to a couple examples of that later. Your team will build networks of stakeholders and interlocutors, and you'll host an event for your cohort to engage with your project. In the second phase, your team will have access to a $2,000 project budget to support any project needs you have. And along the way, we will also organize workshops designed to help you formulate your projects, build your skills, and connect with your cohort. So those will be on topics including public policy and advocacy, storytelling and narrative building, and anti-racist design practice, and more. This is the phase 2 calendar. I found asked to revisit the calendar slides. These dates are also in the program brief, so they are available to you in the program brief, and we'll make sure to send the link around to that following up on this session. You do select your team members for those second phase teams. So we facilitate a process with the cohort of 25 to help you divide into 4 teams. This phase 2 calendar, we continue meeting roughly every other week, but just for evening workshops. So it's not full day. Teams do spend a fair amount of time in this phase working together outside of our formal programming. And then at the end of the fellowship, we host a capstone event for you to showcase and celebrate your work. The evening times are 5 to 8 typically p.m. So I want to share a couple examples of recent Forefront projects to give you a sense of what kind of work comes out of Forefront. Out of our city agency projects, these are our 3 most recent projects. 3 years ago, fellows drafted recommendations to address heat resiliency in some of the city's neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to extreme heat in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Resiliency. Last year, the fellows worked with a deputy mayor's office to investigate how the city could invest in an equitable green economy and publish detailed market insights and programmatic proposals for the city to support MWBEs and employee-owned businesses doing energy efficiency retrofits. And finally, this year, the fellows worked with the Department of City Planning and Mayor's Office of Food Policy to look at how to invest in neighborhood scale food infrastructure. And so they published just, I think a week or 2 ago, actually, a toolkit that includes beautiful illustrations of visualizing the food forward neighborhood of our future, some deep dive analysis on 8 different parts of the food system, and an assessment tool. So just to say, like, these are really projects that have real impact both within and with outside of city government. They've shaped policy priorities, sparked new agency conversations, been cited in news outlets, and more. And then in the phase 2 projects, again, like your team will really determine the shape of what you want to develop. We've seen teams in the past develop original exhibitions, do policy research and develop policy proposals, develop resource guides, take on community co-design projects, spatial analysis, partner on capacity building with a partner organization. And so just to give you a few specifics, and you can actually see phase 2 projects from the past couple of years on our website, but this year with the Neighborhood Fair project, we saw one team develop a set of robust zoning and land use policy reform recommendations, which they presented at the capstone to a room packed full of city agency leaders. We had another team that worked to develop an engagement process to help community gardens build resource sharing tools. And we had another team that developed a set of zines explaining how to set up a food business for entrepreneurs, paired with policy recommendations to improve these processes. And we had a 4th team that developed a resource guide for building neighborhood food hubs. So You'll hear more about the phase 2 projects that Tira, Ezra, and Alexis worked on in a minute, but just wanted to give you a sense of like really the breadth and also the way in which the teams really get to determine the shape of these projects themselves. So why should you apply to Forefront? These projects really do drive the fellowship. It's a chance to work on a challenging equity-based problem facing the city, and to really develop meaningful creative projects in response to that challenge, both in partnership with the city agency and in independent teams. I talked about community before, but again, a big part of Forefront is really the chance to build community among the cohort. The Forefront Fellows are an amazing group and often form close relationships that last long beyond the fellowship. Of course, it's a chance to cultivate your leadership skills and networks, and this is not only through the workshops and the projects, but also in terms of connecting with our broader network at the Urban Design Forum. So we have, as I mentioned, a membership of about 750 leaders across the city and even the world, and we really do our best to connect our Forefront Fellows to our broader membership. And lastly, of course, like have fun. We wouldn't be doing this if it weren't a lot of fun. So who should apply? I'm going to rattle off this list: architects, landscape architects, advocates, planners, engineers, developers, public officials, community leaders, technologists, data scientists, lawyers, scholars, journalists. If you don't see your skill set represented on this slide, we probably still want you to apply. Like I said, we really try to build an interdisciplinary group that's thinking about the year's topic from a variety of angles. We look for folks who are really eager to learn. It's important to us to bring that like learning orientation to the fellowship and to the cohort, looking to learn from each other and participate in that interdisciplinary exchange. We also really believe that these challenges our city faces require diverse leadership, and we aim to reflect that in the cohort that we recruit. It is a professional fellowship, so it's something most fellows do in addition to their full-time jobs. And I know there are a couple more questions about timing in the chat, and we'll definitely get to those during the Q&A. It is an intensive experiential learning program, so we do really ask fellows to be willing to make themselves available for that commitment, including being available for all program dates. Most of our fellows have about 5 to 10 years of work experience and have some demonstrated interest or experience working on the relevant topic, but especially these work experience guidelines are not a hard and fast rule. So, you know, if you're slightly earlier or later in your career than this, like know that that's not a firm number. And I'm happy to field like individual inquiries if you have specific questions. We do require that all of our fellows live or work in New York City. You don't have to live and work, but you must live or work in New York. And so how to apply? The application materials are fairly straightforward. We ask for a resume or CV, 500 or so word statement of interest, and more details on that statement of interest you can find in the application materials. We welcome you to submit a nominating letter. It's optional, so not required, but if you have someone you can ask, that's wonderful. And applications are due Thursday, July 21st by midnight. So if you're on our website, there's a Google form to submit the application. So now that I've given you the kind of high level overview, what's this about? I want to actually welcome on 3 of our fantastic Forefront alumni to give you a little bit more of the fellow perspective. What is the experience like? So Tira Mack, Ezra Moser, and Alexis Luna, we are excited to have joining us today. I see them turning on their videos, awesome. And I think Lola is going to help get those videos spotlighted. So Ezra and Alexis joining us here are freshly graduated from their Forefront Fellowship. They were part of the Neighborhood Fair cohort that concluded just a couple of weeks ago. And Tira was part of last year's Cooperative Works cohort. So I would love to hear from you all, Alexis, Ezra, and Tira. First, just if I could ask you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do for work.
Who's going first? Okay, I guess I am.
Yeah, go ahead. You spoke first.
Chat myself. Hi everyone, my name is Alexis. I work at an architecture office in Brooklyn called Future Expansion Architects, who are also friends of the UDF network of kind of like cohort people. I'm an architectural designer with a background in infrastructure planning, and I was very interested in food at like an academic level before getting into Forefront, and that was kind of like my intro into it. It was like food systems. I had an interest academically in food, and that's how I segued into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexis. Ezra, can I pass to you next?
Sure. We're on the kind of the why applied question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Alexis,
sure.
yeah. So give us your name, give us a little bit about what you do for work and why did you apply to Forefront?
So I'm Ezra Moser. I'm a program manager and senior planner at Department of City Planning. And I work primarily in Midtown Manhattan, a lot of commercial real estate development policy. And that's honestly part of the reason why I applied to Forefront, is to do something that was, very much of interest to me. I took, courses on food systems planning in graduate school. I was always very interested, but it was, not exactly in my bailiwick, as far as my day-to-day job. So I really wanted to take on a new challenge, meet a whole new cohort of like incredibly interesting people. And from my organization, there's been a lot of people in the past who've participated as UDF fellows, and they're all really awesome. So kind of wanted to follow in the footsteps and get more involved with Urban Design Forum.
Thanks, Ezra.
Hello, I am Tiara Mack. I am from the Cooperative Works Fellowship. I am currently the Executive Director of the Pitkin Avenue Business Improvement District. Formerly, when I started the fellowship, and you guys, whoever applies, and somebody is going to change their job. Maybe half the cohort is going to change their job during the fellowship. But when I started the fellowship, I was a policy advisor at SBS in the Workforce Development Division. Why did I choose Forefront? So I am also a former Neighborhood 360 fellow at SBS, and my whole economic development is like my passion. So, and that's so corny, but it really is. So like, that's why I'm at a bid now, but in workforce development. So I chose that specific fellowship because at the time when I was in workforce, we had a Cool Roofs program that was like kind of based around the energy efficiency goals of the mayor's office. And I knew that like the workforce training that was available for Cool Roofs was like an entry-level job, lower pay. And I was more interested in how do we connect the larger paying jobs to MWBEs and communities of color. So that's essentially why I chose to participate in that fellowship. Yeah, and that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So you participated in 2 different cohort years, as you said, Tiara in Cooperative Works, Alexis and Ezra in Neighborhood Fair. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit just about the phase 1 projects that each of you worked on and sort of what you learned from or got out of your phase 1 project. And Tiara, maybe I'll pass to you first this time.
So please know, I knew nothing about energy efficiency when I started. I had very little knowledge about energy efficiency when I started the fellowship. So phase 1 was really nice for me because I got to learn a ton about Local Law 97, all of the different stakeholders involved in Local Law 97 and why it's important. And phase 1 was very research intense. You're going to meet all the stakeholders in all of the game in whatever the subject is. Yours is waste management. So you're going to meet all of the people that have something to say. Catherine did a great job at getting all of the experts in the room for us. And what else I liked? I really liked working in groups for phase 1. You were able to bounce ideas off of each other. I see a lot of questions about like how much time is going to be put into it. I was fortunate to be involved with some really good groups that was able to pick up the slack for, and not even slack. It's just that we're all working full time and trying to do this project, but anybody that's willing to apply to this project is more than likely willing to do a lot of work. And honestly, another thing about this fellowship is that it's giving you an opportunity to do something outside of your job, especially for all of my folks that's working in bureaucracy right now, where you don't always get to have that creative opportunity and that innovative opportunity. This is the time to do that. So I recommend everyone who, especially all my city government folks, because I've been there, who want to apply, because this is going to give you that opportunity to think outside the box and connect with people who think like you or different than you, but that same energy as you.
Thanks, Tiara. Alexis and Ezra, do you want to jump in on this one as well?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to follow that up, so I'll just give it a shot. You know, in phase one, I think one of the biggest takeaways was how much my, you know, idea of policy solutions to, you know, an issue that I was getting a crash course in were challenged. I mean, I think that phase one felt kind of like if you combined a 101 level and 301 level class at the same time. And, you know, that's partly because I came into it with a, you know, pretty like limited elementary knowledge of the subject matter, but I was also working with a lot of people in the program who they work in the field. So there's so much that you can absorb from them. And, you know, it's a lot to keep up to learn from people who are, you know, really this, you know, this is their passion. This is exactly what they do. But I think one of the most interesting, you know, experiential learning aspects of it for me was figuring out how can I deploy my skill set to, you know, be a leader in my group and help with our phase one deliverable, which, you know, for my subgroup within phase one, we studied food retail, consumption, and post-consumption processes, and wrote policy suggestions. We did a lot of on-the-ground research in, my group was specifically in Mott Haven in the Bronx. Some groups were in Corona and Elmhurst in Queens, others in Brownsville and East New York and Brooklyn. And so, yeah, the experiential learning aspect of it, and, you know, getting up to speed and, you know, developing the confidence to realize that I can get thrown in with people who know a lot more and still not just learn and retain, but also contribute and, you know, feel like a happy, successful team member.
Both of those are hard to follow up. I really love the comparison to say that it was like a 101 and a 301 class, because I totally felt that from my end as someone who has not been a farmer or someone in food policy. I came into it with like, I have an academic interest in it, and I feel pretty passionate about immigrant communities that kind of cultivate their own food systems. And then on day one, I got to speak to a farmer who's a director of farming at Randall's Island, and I told them about my thesis project, and she was like, "Oh, that's cool. How would this work?" And it's like these conversations that get cultivated in phase one that I think are quite amazing. It's also the most time during the forefront where you'll be able to have the entire cohort in one room. And I think Catherine just does this like really great job at selecting all these people with like great energy that can just come together and feed off each other. And yeah, I think the first two orientation days were just like a ray of sunshine, especially after like a long lockdown period. That's like good stuff. But more specifically, my team, it's also in Mott Haven, my team worked on doing the assessment tool portion of the toolkit. And it was wonderful to have conversations within my group from people who are super well versed in policy management and food advocacy, and then talking directly to someone who had been running a garden throughout the pandemic and doing emergency food service, or talking to someone at, say, like New Roots, who had initiated refugee, like a space for refugees to farm and feel a place where they are. You get this directness to people that otherwise would be so difficult to kind of come across with, just super rewarding. And then you kind of go back into your groups and think tank it out, workshop it. It's quite amazing. And I think the thing that I want to stress, or just like bring to the table now, having gone through it, coming with like a novice level, is that everyone has something to bring from their background, from their own personal experience, from the knowledge. And from phase one, and also especially in phase two, I felt like everyone who I worked with brought their strength to the table and felt like they took a real bit of ownership towards their project.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. So I'd love for you all to tell folks also about the phase 2 projects that you worked on. And so Alexis and Ezra, you're actually in different phase 2 teams. So we've got three cool projects to hear about here. And maybe Alexis, I'll go to you first on this one.
Yeah, so my team, we were developing this facilitation guide and this like booklet to basically figure out how to create a platform for better resource sharing between growers. Having an actual grower on our team was kind of like an amazing blessing for this, because we got like direct contact with someone to see like, okay, how do you share wood chips between one garden to another? And that was kind of the genesis of the project. The grower or like farmer on my team was already like came prepared with this project idea, and I think all of us band together and found our own interests within this pool, and we got to kind of touch base with the network of her farming network, and also there was also an arborist on our team who was very close with other orgs like Green Gorillas and Green Thumb, that just had this amazing network of community gardens that we could speak to. So that it was amazing. We set up a couple of workshops during our phase 2 project to collect feedback from other growers, use what best way we can deploy this resource sharing tool. We also made like a lot of friends throughout the way, like with Green Gorillas, to see how we can continue on this project afterwards. Because I think in mind we had this realization that like, okay, the ambition for this project is quite big, and I think that's a good thing. And then you think like, okay, what do we do afterwards? Maybe we continue it, maybe we grow our network of friends and see who would be able to take this project on, or how we can continue it on after the fellowship, which to us from day one was like a big priority method. And during like one of our last days, we thought like, well, maybe we could like start this. We like made an Instagram account and like started, you know, like saying like wood chips, like can get them. And kind of miraculously it happened, like within like I think the first day or two, someone just like pulled up to Randall's Island where my teammate Sierra worked at, and she just like shoveled wood chips onto them. They took it to their community garden in the Bronx, and yeah, it was pretty amazing. That worked out. Yeah, I think the creativity that you can get that Sierra mentioned earlier is outside of your day-to-day, you can really explore something that's just like totally out of your psyche, out of your Rolodex of daily tasks that like you wouldn't get to otherwise. And yeah, like I'm just incredibly grateful that I worked with the people I did. Like my team, there was like an arborist, a farmer, a data analyst, school professor and a DOT like manager, and like me and a couple other designers. Like that was a crazy pairing that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alexis. Ezra, let's go to you next.
All right. So my phase 2 team, well, first things first about phase 2, one thing that's really cool is that you do get to like pair up with people after you've had basically like a semester of getting to know everyone, seeing everyone's kind of work styles, their energy, skill sets, etc. So I ended up with a group of cohort members who I really liked. We ended up working really well together, all very mellow and constructive type of collaborative environment. And we wrote a resource guide and charrette tool for a neighborhood food hub, which is kind of an emerging typology in the food system that's really intended to address a lot of the kind of proverbial gaps in the mainstream food system. Food hubs exist typically as these, on the periphery of a city, an aggregation distribution type of facility, which do have like an important aim of trying to source from a variety of local producers or BIPOC providers and try to improve these providers' market share. But we envision, you know, a new typology where at a smaller scale, a neighborhood level food hub could be engaging in like aggregation distribution activities, but also provide wraparound services. It could be a really trauma-informed environment that's very responsive to the community and is a real like asset of economic empowerment and food sovereignty. And we looked at best practices between both food hubs and organizations that were kind of adjacent to this neighborhood food hub typology. And we wrote like a best practices manual. And there was so much to write. I think we initially went into it thinking, oh, like 20 pages, be nice and, you know, neat. And like, you know, it was like 50 pages by the time we're done, because it's just so much interesting info that we're learning. We, you know, spoke to and visited organizations who are, you know, running successful versions of this typology or something very just close and adjacent to it. And we also created, because my group also had someone from EDC in it, so the two kind of planner folks were like, well, it'd be a cool idea to have, you know, a charrette board or something that you can, you know, present at like a stakeholder meeting or community meeting to help identify what could this, you know, what could a neighborhood food hub be? What are your, you know, what would you add to it? What would you take away? Do you think we're missing anything here? These are some of the components that we've identified and some of the things that we think it has to be, but what do you think? So those are actually like practicable deliverables, and like that's really cool. And our the $2,000 budget was like came very much in handy for putting together like a really beautiful you know, resource guide. And so it was a really rewarding experience.
Thanks, Ezra. And I wonder if we could actually pick up on a thread that Alexis and Ezra, you were pulling out and talking about the phase 2 teams, which is like bringing together these interdisciplinary groups. Tira, I know in your phase 2 team, you had folks who were working within city government, working at architecture offices, working at nonprofits, folks who were really deeply expert in the topic and folks who were newer to the topic. Like, could you tell us a little bit about like how that kind of interdisciplinary mix and mix of different kind of levels of expertise worked out?
Okay, so our topic was cooperative business roundtable, demystifying cooperative finance. Give me 1 second. And basically, we were trying to break down the complications of worker owner cooperatives financing, which was still complicated. So our whole goal was to get a roundtable going of people who actually could speak the language consistently and in plain English for the people who needed to learn more about it. So that involved one of the folks that was in my group is Jonathan. He was at EDC at the time. I think he's still at EDC. He was at EDC at the time, and he knew a ton about worker owner cooperatives just from his work at EDC. I knew a lot about it informally from reading just, you know, books like Collective Courage and just reading about it, honestly. And then we had folks who were on the finance side who were accustomed to putting on those type of roundtables, because we had people at like architects firms who have done that type of work. So that was all super helpful and interesting at us coming to our final project. And just working with people in different fields it makes the work actually more enjoyable, because you're getting a different perspective. Not only are you getting a different perspective, but you're also getting people who have done work similar to that. Like whatever your final project is someone who in the room who has done something, who has put on this type of presentation, has developed this type of guideline, knows best practices for it, and so on.
Thanks, Tara. So I want to get in one more question here, and then we'll get through some of the questions that are popping up in the chat. If y'all have other questions for the fellows who are here or for me, please drop them in the chat. Or if you'd like to ask them off mute, you can use the raise hand button, and we'll give you the ability to ask your question off mute. So my last question for now for you all is really just like, what did you get out of the fellowship experience? Sort of high level, like what would you say you took away from Forefront?
I can go first, I guess. Why not? So I gained a literacy in a field that, you know, I didn't know a ton about. It actually totally coincidentally, like my best friend is doing his MPA right now, and he has to do a paper on food systems, and he was asking me for pointers, and I was just like, I realized I could talk for a whole hour, you know, in detail, and, you know, provide him with like a really good overview and places to begin research. That was cool. So to learn something completely new, the cross-pollination that's been talked about, you know, tackling a challenging equity issue that's like outside of my usual kind of bailiwick, and getting to tackle that with, you know, a diverse array of stakeholders, but also people who are experts in the field, some of whom who like write some of the reports that we read. I think leadership skills, also in light of working with people who are experts in their field when you're kind of a newcomer. So like figuring out, you know, not just like, you know, how you can contribute, but like how do your natural skill sets like fit into like the work program. And so that was a really enriching component for me. Obviously, like meeting an exceptionally interesting cohort of people, that to me almost kind of goes without saying. You know, super interesting group of young professionals, new friends. I really liked my phase 2 cohort, and we're all pretty tight, and we'll certainly be hanging out post program. And I think just generally a healthy dose of like humility and gratitude as well, because, you know, we're tackling, you know, very, you know, it's a serious equity issue, you know, food insecurity. So it was a, you know, just par excellence learning experience.
I can follow up. I can attest to all the cool people you meet. I was lucky enough to do the fellowship with my best friend, who ended up being on the same team together. Both have a similar interest in food. But I think the biggest kind of pullaways for me were kind of twofold. One was this realization that if you care about a certain cause, there's more than likely people who are on the same wavelength as you, and you will quickly find where those people are and how they operate and how like nicely you can make these kind of like alliances. It's also just a sort of reaffirming moment that if you care about something, like you can start to work to do something about it. In this case, when it comes to community gardens, in my case, and you're sort of sharing resources, there's countless orgs that have already started this work who are continuing to do this work. And I think that's a reaffirming thing, that whatever it is that you kind of care about, you're most likely not alone in it. And why do it alone? Why not connect and tap into a larger network of people who are empathic and intelligent and creative, that are willing to kind of like grow and are willing to, you know, kind of fight the fight with you. And I think on another note, not to get super sappy, but I think for me, I got to find like sort of like a footing in another community where I feel like I can more empathically relate to a lot of the people that I would meet and spoke with within like the world of community gardens, are usually people like myself who migrated to the country either at a young age or at an older age, and they're really just trying to find their place in the world. And sometimes within the food system, that's kind of like what you have to do. Like when you want to eat the food you want to eat, you might have to grow it, you might have to find it. You find your pockets of where to make home. And I've like gotten to see that quite nicely in the Bronx. I like first saw that in Queens when I first came to the country, and it's just kind of gives you another thing to feel connected and grounded to. Yeah.
Thanks, Marcus. Tara, you want to round us out on this one?
Yes, of course. What I met lifelong friends in the fellowship. Like you're definitely, if you're here already, you're gonna learn for the rest of your life anyway, because interest in something like that is already telling me that you're probably a lifelong learner. So the learning component is great. And, and I said before that the ability to be creative and think innovatively about a subject that you're passionate about, definitely hands down the best reason to do it. But then the second reason is I met a few people that like I wish I've known my whole life, but I met them at the fellowship and we're really good friends now. And I think that that's important as well, because it's nothing like having friends that are interested in the same things as you, especially at this, I don't know how old this group is, but like at this, not middle age, but this late 20s, early 30s world, it's really hard to meet people outside of work. And sometimes you work with people who are at work but they're not as passionate about the work as you are. So this is your opportunity to meet those type of people.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, Ezra. So there are some great questions in the chat. Again, like feel free to keep sending those in the chat or use that raise hand button if you want to ask a question. There are a couple of questions about time commitment that I can respond to, and then also curious to hear from the fellows' perspective. So in the first phase are the full day Fridays. Yes, those are full day workshops. That's 9 to 5. And that's either like a field work day where we're out at site visits and in the field in the morning and then coming together in the afternoon as a cohort, or a full day workshop where we're working on the deliverable as a cohort. What's the time commitment in terms of hours? We say probably about 4 to 8 hours per week outside of the scheduled forefront activities, but that will fluctuate throughout the fellowship. There will be periods of time, especially at the end of the year. It's always a bit of a sprint to the finish towards the capstone, and other times of the year that might be quieter. And I think, Tira mentioned that we also really see the teams like stepping in and stepping back as people's work schedules fluctuate to help cover for each other. But I want to get the fellows' insight on that question about time commitment, but first just want to respond to, is it possible to attend some of these events remotely if we are traveling? We are planning for next year's program to be in person, so we are asking for folks to be available in person for those dates. If something about the COVID context necessitates a different format or hybrid participation, we'll work through that with the cohort before the start of the fellowship. But we are asking folks to be available in person. So let me first ask, let me open it up to Alexis, Ezra, and Tira to talk about a little bit about time commitment. If anyone
I want to answer this. Yes, it is going to be a time commitment. And I think this is also an opportunity I'm the type of person, I'm always trying to get something out of my job. So I think this is the opportunity for you to, if you don't have these opportunities at your work, to maybe bring this to your job and say, I really want to participate in this. And I would like for these days to be compensated as continuing learning. In which you will just be taking a day off and they will pay you for that day off and you'll be actually here and it'll be like a work day. It's not coming out of your PTO or anything like that. And honestly, a lot of jobs already have this in their policies, but people don't really utilize them. So I would definitely, and I know some people are saying like this is going to conflict with my work schedule, but honestly, depending on the company that you're at or the agency that you're at, they may have opportunities for you to already do some continuing learning and then they don't have to pay for it. So they'll be happy about that. They're just literally paying you for a day. So that's one of the things. Please try and get the day out your job. What is it, 3 days, Catherine? Phil?
Yeah, so it's
work days?
It's the fall Fridays. So they're in the calendar, but I think it's 6 Fridays in the fall.
But the outside work is going to be time consuming. Definitely. I'm not even gonna, but and I'm gonna be honest, something that like towards the end of my fellowship, I had a traumatic event in my family, as well as I started my new job as the bid ED on like May 17th, and then something else happened later on in the year. So I literally was kind of tapped out of energy, mental capacity, and everything towards the very end. But I would still say this was a worthwhile experience. And if those events didn't happen, I probably would be even more elated about the experience. So please apply.
Thanks, Tara. Yeah, go ahead, Ozzy.
Yeah, no, I would say that, it really is in kind of ebbs and flows in terms of workload. Like I had last year a particularly intense fall anyways, as we're closing out the last administration's like top priorities, getting them across the finish line. And phase one I thought was the most time commitment. My office allowed that to be like an excuse absent, so it didn't have to go towards my time off or anything like that, which was great. And I work in a collaborative environment where folks could pick up the slack. But yeah, I felt that phase one was more hours, and then there was a pretty long stretch of several months where it was very mellow in terms of the amount of time commitment. Now I think it depends also on with your phase two group, how do you want to work, what's your work style, it's really very free form. And I think that my phase two group, everyone is very laid back, and so I would have said that there was, several months where there was closer to an hour a week of commitment, and maybe 2 if you're throwing in an interview with someone, or maybe 3 if you're going off site to go look at something. But it was very relaxed. And then it ramps up towards the end as you're actually cohering everything that you just did into your final deliverable. So I do remember last year hearing 4 to 8 hours a week and thinking that would be every week. And it's very much, that would probably be an average across a very long time. So I can say that there were months where it was 1 to 2 hours a week. And that really helped too, because, you learn so much in phase one. You're really just digesting a ton at once. And then it gives you some time to process, think, and reflect on, where do I want to go with phase two? What are the subjects that I've, now been turned on to that, I really want to pursue the most.
Maybe for the sake of time, Alexis, I'll just say if you have a couple thoughts here, and then I want to make sure we get to other questions.
Yes, I think with time commitments, just remember you're in a team, so don't burn yourself out. I basically got to that point at one point, and I was luckily saved by my teammates, because I couldn't bring something literally to the capstone event, and someone from my team had a backup to bring this deliverable. It was a booklet. So just in terms of time, don't pile everything onto yourself. Trust in your trust in your teammates, and people still take vacations throughout this time period. I think everyone in my group still went to go get haircuts, went to go vacation. I still went to the dentist. Stuff. It is time consuming. You do commit to it. My group met, I think, phase two every week, and then it picked up. It was every week, and then twice a week, and then towards the end it was we were meeting 4 times a week. It all depends, but it is commitment. But you're in a team, so there's delegate, don't burn out. If you get it.
Thanks, Alexis. So I'm going to try and run through our last few questions in the last 3 minutes here, so we get out under the hour. There's a question of, apart from the 2K grant for the phase 2 project, is there any compensation planned? We're able to offer the program free of cost to participants, but we aren't able to support individual stipends. We do offer that $2,000 honorarium for project costs in the second phase. There's a question of, did any of the projects influence policy and lead to new initiatives? Definitely, I would say yes here, and it's also a long game. So one of our earliest forefront projects was a shelter for all year, looking at homelessness, and one team that year did an analysis of public bathroom availability throughout the city, and they've actually continued that work over the past several, it must be 3 or 4 years now, advocating for public bathrooms. Their research has been cited in news articles and in legislative efforts. It was recently cited in a New York Times article, and they are now starting to see, as part of a broader movement for public bathroom advocacy, traction at both the city and state level. In terms of the phase 1 projects, those are really powerful in setting agency priorities and seeding new thinking. So, the year that we worked with the Mayor's Office of Resiliency, the fellows developed a set of, I think it was over 80 policy ideas or something like that. And the Mayor's Office of Resiliency really pulled from those to seed some new directions in their work. And we're starting to hear that as well with this year's food fellowship, that it has helped the Department of City Planning advance new conversations about food that they weren't having before the fellowship. Okay, a couple of final questions. Were all the site visits pre-established, or can the cohort kind of help direct site visits? We do set them out for you all, but then we'll also check in throughout phase 1 to say, are there other folks you want to be talking to, or there are other sites you want to be at? So there's definitely welcome and encourage you all to give us thinking and direction on where you'd like to be in those phase 1 site visits. And then finally, I see a question about young professionals of 1 to 2 years of experience. Like I said, we're not super, we're not super hard on that number of years of experience. So if you feel like this is something that would benefit you at this stage in your career, and it's a topic you're really excited about, or a program you're really excited about, definitely welcome you to apply. So with that, we are at the end of our hour, but I want to say a big thank you to Ezra, Alexis, and Tiara for being here with us. We will share a recording of the presentation, and I will also just share very quickly my email on the screen. You're welcome to reach out to me with any questions. Would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here, and hope to be in touch again soon. All right. Take care, y'all. Have a great afternoon.